think about your favorite restaurant. Tell me what school the chef went to. You probably don't know and you probably don't care.
Frankly, how could society and our culture move in a direction that really recognized people for the skills they had, not just diminish them for the degrees they lacked? You have people who have the skills to do the job, and they gain them lots of different ways. And just because they didn't get them the same way and they don't look the same way, that doesn't mean that that's not where the talent is. In fact, it actually means that this is an incredibly important source of talent that not only gets you more skills, more skilled workers, but also gets you more diversity of perspectives and lots of other benefits.
Welcome to the Paperless Pathways podcast. It's a podcast for stars by stars. My name is LaShana Lewis, and I am your host. In this episode, we're going to sit down with Byron Agist, the CEO and co-founder of Opportunity at Work. You'll get to hear a little bit about how he got involved with stars and the origins of the Tear the Paper Ceiling movement. I hope you enjoy. Hello, Byron. We are back together again. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. You want to give a little bit about you and set the stage of how you became involved with stars.
So I'm Byron Agist. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Opportunity at Work. And the purpose of Opportunity at Work was to ensure, right, that the people we were seeing out in the country who had already been, doing everything learned, that they could work, learn, and earn to their full potential. And that if you could do the job, you actually could get the job. And that if you learn something valuable, you should be able to earn more. And that should not depend on whether you had a college degree or not. And so that was the mission of Opportunity at Work from the beginning. And then over the course of time, we saw actually first working with these tech hire communities, we would see over and over that a bottleneck they faced is that employers might be at the table, but they don't hire at the table. The large scale hiring requires data, it requires business process, it requires workflows. And so we realized that we have to bring something to the field that it lacked. And there wasn't kind of an intermediary that was really doing that on a scalable basis, even though they were great nonprofits, LaunchCode among them. There were many others I could cite who were doing great work on training and even doing great work on connecting employers. But we wanted to say, what can we learn from that? And how do we take it to scale, to a scale worthy of the opportunity of millions of the people we ultimately now talk about as stars, skilled through alternative routes.
Awesome. Well, I've been obviously in this boat for a while too with you. Just kind of to see the transition from tech hire initiative to, having the various, spots and programs around the country. I remember going to one meetup in Chicago where we all kind of got together and we talked about the initiative and what it meant for us, and now going into Opportunity at Work. So I'm wondering, about what time did the STARS acronym come about? Because I remember kind of being in there in the middle of it, but it was one of those things where it's just like it was there, and then we just all kind of embraced it. Where along the story, or am I too far? If I'm too far ahead,
No.
we got to back up.
It was a really, really, really important part of the story. And this is a good time to talk about it because I mentioned a minute ago that we were aiming to do this at scale, right? Sort of, like if you think about a company or an industry, like a big business can do a little bit of anything it wants to, but to do a lot of something, it actually has to have data. It has to have business process. It really has to be systematized. And now I say that, and someone listening might wonder, well, what does that have to do with stars?
Right.
What is the name stars? But it has everything to do with it. And here's why. Companies would do campus hiring because college was a thing, right? Like, I mean, college is actually 18,000 different things. It's not really one thing, but still the idea that it's a thing. So campus hiring, and you make a decision, do you do that or not? And then you might do some more, some places than others, like what's a good fit for you? Or I like the school for these roles, whatever. But the point is there's a whole system in place to do it. But there was no system in place for stars. And part of the reason why is because college was a thing, but everything else was not a thing, right? Everything else was just sort of like jumbled, a little bit of this, a little bit of
It
that.
was like the
Just so that
default, if you don't go to college, then you must
yeah,
be doing this
yeah.
other thing. Yeah,
And so, I mean, because people weren't going out of their way to come up with new ways to exclude people who were skilled. What they were doing is they were following the prompts, and they had built-in college as like a, just like a prompt. Like, okay, well, that's an easy screen, and you sort of do it. So, in other words, if we were trying to replace it, right? Like, so if we were trying to say, no, it's terrible to screen people out for pedigree. Like, well, on what basis do you screen them in, and how do you think about them? And there was both the fundamental problem that there was not a talent category. And by a talent category, I mean, like, yeah, college grads is like a talent category, right? Like, it's like people think, oh, that's it, right? I mean, that's who I'm looking for. So stars is a talent category, meaning skilled through alternative routes. And the way stars specifically came about um, is, first of all, listening to people who had been on this journey and who were in this situation. And we did a lot of before we did anything else, we did a lot of qualitative like focus groups and just listening. We didn't have stars as a term. We didn't like start by testing that out. Like we
right.
just, and what we
It
heard
wasn't
over
like a buzzword yet.
and over was that, hey, I have the same skills, just got there a different way, a different route, a different path. People would say different things, but it was common. It was that idea. Because remember, skilled through alternative routes. This is not alternative people, and this is not alternative skills. It's alternative routes. Okay. It's alternative routes. But what are stars? What do employers most need to know about stars? They're skilled, right? Stars have skills. And the question of, does this star have the skills you need? Well, that's a good question. Go find out. The same thing is true of college grads. They don't say like, oh, you're a college grad, so here's the job. But they use college grads. Ah, that's a signal, right? And now let me look deeper. Same thing with stars here. Like that's a signal. Someone is skilled through alternative routes. So, um, and 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 so the question we get a lot is, oh, well, yeah, but how do I go about hiring stars? How do I know? And I always answer, now you're asking the right question. Now you're doing your
Right.
job,
Right.
right? So, and
You're
that's the
digging in. Yeah.
yeah, digging in because, but it starts with that talent category. What else? Without a talent category, you can't have a definition. Without a definition, you can't have data. Without a data, without data, you can't have structured decision making in companies. You can't have the business process and workflow that companies depend on to like make important decisions. You can't have a platform strategy where Indeed or LinkedIn or Jobcase or others like start to right. So all of those things depend on it. And what's worse, the kinds of more academic kind of labels that are out there, like literally define people by something they lack. So literally, as soon as by the other definitions you might hear, as soon as someone is successful, they disappear from the category. They're no longer part
Right.
of the category. But
Right.
stars can be wildly successful and still be stars. In fact, millions of stars are wildly successful professionally, are in high wage jobs, and right. And so now when people say, well, oh, how do you know this can work? I said, because it's already worked with like 5 million people. So of course it can work.
Exactly.
The question is whether your company can make it work, right? Like so it's incredibly important. And it's I mean, it is partly a matter of respect. I mean, to sort of, I'm happy to say that there's been like huge uptake and I've honestly never seen like a newly introduced term like that as sort of have as much of a positive resonance among people whom it describes. But I'm happy about that. I'm proud about that. But the reason why is because it started with stars talking about their journeys, and that's how the name came about.
I love that people are embracing the terminology as soon as you put it out. Because I've seen sometimes where people have a terminology given to them that describes something about them, and they say, "Oh no, I don't like using that term. I want to use another one."
I think
And
that's
it's
most of the time, don't you? I mean, I think most
yeah,
of the time it feels weird, right?
it
Like that.
feels it yeah, it feels a little strange, but I've actually seen something different with stars. Like, even with LinkedIn and getting on there and talking about my story, as a person who is skilled through alternative routes, and being able to share that. But you know what? The big signifier is after you get off the stage.
Yeah.
When people come to you and they say, "Thank you for sharing my story," and even just recently, being at the ACT Workforce Summit, getting off of the stage after doing the keynote, I was approached by 4 individuals almost immediately. I am also a star. Like, they had not really heard the term, but I go and I give a speech, and then they come to me and say, "I already identify with this, and let me tell you my story, and let me share what I'm doing so that I can help other stars as well." And I think that's kind of one of the beautiful things about being able to, people are like, "Oh, how do you feel about labels?" And I'm like, "Well, you need to be able to name a thing in order to solve it." So it's, one of those things where, that this is a way for us to signify to people there is this community of people, and for people to also find their own community, because it's easier to find a community if you know the name of the community than it is to kind of just wander around and hope that maybe, through serendipity, you'll be able to find them. But this is not a podcast about me. This is I mean, kind of, but yeah.
Really, I'm really happy to hear you say that and that experience. I will say that I've just seen the light bulbs go off so often, including people who are not stars, but suddenly
Right.
when they kind of hear the term in context and everything, they realize, oh wow, like, this person, for example, this person who was my mentor when I first started the company, who showed me the ropes and who without whom I could never have been successful. I've been promoted 3 times and they're in the same job. Like suddenly light bulb goes off. That's why. Right? Like, I mean, and so I just think
Mhm.
it's really I mean, it's important. Like it wouldn't work and we would if stars didn't embrace it. So that's the most important thing. But I think it also allows there to be a recognition by non-stars who are disproportionately in kind of decision-making positions at companies just because of the way things have played out over the last 30 years. And it makes a big difference. I'm happiest about it um, when stars feel that resonance. Like um, I do a lot of interviews, and I remember like one actually the Today Show was kind of a big one, and the both the sound technician and the video tech, the camera person at the end of it said to me, "Oh, I'm a star. I'm a star too."
Wow.
Like, I went, yeah, and then actually another person was filming for that same show,
Mhm.
like 3 hours later, who is a star themselves. And at the end of that, those two technicians said not only to the person they were interviewing, but to the reporter and to the producer that they were stars. And funny enough, the reporter and the producer had no idea. Like even though they'd been and they were like blown away. And it's like because these people are like they depend on them, right? Like completely. They have like
Mhm.
huge technical aptitude. They're doing very complicated things that the success of the whole thing depends on.
Right.
There was just, a lot of people assume that, oh, that must mean they have all sorts of, degrees and credentials, whereas actually so many people, like that's the thing about it. That, as I said, millions of stars are already in high wage jobs, already highly successful. And if you look back at what they were doing 10 years before, they might have been doing something that you said, oh, I wouldn't hire someone from there, but you're wrong. Look at the talent you missed. And so don't keep making the same mistake
Mhm.
because we're solving problems. Companies have problems to solve, and stars are problem solvers.
This episode of Paperless Pathways is brought to you by Opportunity at Work. They're on a mission to unlock potential for over 70 million stars, workers who are skilled through alternative routes, like with apprenticeships or military service. See how they're connecting talent with opportunity at opportunityatwork.org. Opportunity at Work, unlocking potential, creating upward mobility, and building pathways. I love using the analogy of the restaurant, like we've done before, where I ask people, think about your favorite restaurant. Tell me what school the chef went to. Most people don't know, and I said you probably don't know, and you probably don't care. You care that the food is good and that it's safe for you to consume. You're putting your life in the hands of a person that could possibly be a star, but that wouldn't make a difference as to whether or not you go patronize that restaurant. It's literally about kind of understanding the whole person, and what their personality is like, but as well as the skills that they can bring to the table. And we've all seen, 5-star chefs and personalities on TV that are stars, that are people who maybe got through, their cooking regime through an alternative route. May it be standing in the kitchen with their grandmother and helping them out, all the way to, maybe working at various restaurants with various different backgrounds and getting all of this together, and then deciding to create their own version. And a lot of times, what I hear with stars is that they saw this hole, they saw a gap somewhere that needed to be filled. They did the research and the work that they needed to do to figure out, went through the trials and tribulations, used to being wrong, used to correcting themselves, and, righting the ship, and then being able to kind of offer that same opportunity to another person who walked the same path as them.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of this beautiful thing about looking at the star's journey. So what I want to get in here though is tear the paper ceiling,
Okay.
which I am obviously, for those who are just listening, I'm actually wearing a tear the paper ceiling pen and a tear the paper ceiling shirt. There is paper behind me because I actually have a screen, a paper screen. But the whole thing of tear the paper ceiling seems to be something that is starting to now resonate, in addition to using the terminology star. So can you talk a little bit about the origin of tear the paper ceiling?
We always felt from the beginning that this had to have something of a movement character. And I think it was very important to have stars first because both because that centered who the movement was about, and it also, as I said, allowed you to do things at scale, like through platforms, through business process, like we had this talent category. But there was something bigger about the sort of the social movement, and we wanted to tap into an experience that kind of everybody has had to some extent, and in a sense, everybody's. And this idea of tearing the paper ceiling came. There's a lot of work that went into that too. We did that, together with our partners at the Ad Council and Ogilvy and so forth. When I say we, I mean opportunity to work. But the idea was to have this big kind of tent pole um, where it could say, um, some people describe it. I don't tend to describe it this way, but some people say like every movement needs an enemy. And like, okay, but companies can't be the enemy because like they're you're hired, right?
Right.
Employers can't be
Like
the
you're trying to
enemy.
work for the company.
Yeah, 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 right. And it's sort of like what's really the enemy, and so this idea of the enemy is actually a paper ceiling. The enemy is this thing that's like that's holding us apart. That's kind of keeping employers from the talent that they could have, and that's like keeping um, resourceful, skilled, hardworking people from like the jobs they could do and the careers they could have and the contributions they could make. And it's just like it's tragic, and at the same time, it's paper thin because it's not like a lead ceiling. It's not like an iron ceiling. It's a paper ceiling. It's literally um, like you could tear right through it if you want to.
Right.
And by the way, I want to say something because sometimes people say, "Oh, is that against college degrees?" Well, it's absolutely not. It's not against college. It's not
Right.
even against degrees. If you want to think about degrees as paper, I'm going to say the worst possible use for that paper is to hold other people back, right?
Um,
College,
I
an
love
incredible,
that part. I
yeah,
feel like that needs to be somewhere. Maybe put that on the
yeah,
website.
college can be an incredible bridge to opportunity, and it is for millions of people, and I wish it were for millions more. And it should never be a drawbridge that pulls up behind it and anyone who doesn't get across it because they've got family responsibilities, they've got work responsibilities, they don't have generational wealth. I mean, people drop out of college not mainly because they're irresponsible, but because they're responsible. They've got other responsibilities. They've
Right.
got
Life
work.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've got, if you're working 30, 40 hours a week and your work schedule does not match your course schedule and you can't get the prerequisites and you don't. So, I mean, more than half of stars have college credits, right? And so so it's not about like whether you took a college trajectory or whatever. It's really about what skills did you gain along the way, whether in school, whether in work? And the fact of the matter is, most skills, even for people who are very highly educated and highly credentialed, most of their skills come from what they learn on the job. And that's understood across the board. But in the system that wasn't working and that we've started to change, what you see is that, and we've actually we see this in an academic research that went into the National Bureau of Economic Research, that was actually, as stars were moving, in the last 30 years, as if that on the job experience didn't matter. And we know, because again, once we had the stars category, we could go very, very, very deep on the data and what the data tells us from 130 million job transitions and the skills distance from every job to every other job. People move through skills, whether they've got a bachelor's degree, whether they're stars, whether they're not even high school graduates. They do tend to move through skills, but the movements that are allowed to stars are just much, much narrower for the most part. And many moves that stars could easily make based on the skills they have, where they absolutely have highly relevant skills, adjacent skills, sometimes completely overlapping skills. Only 40% of the job transitions from stars like results in a wage gain. And so there's a lot of this sort of lateral movement. But I think that what we can see of 70 million stars in this country, 30 million stars today have the skills for jobs that pay 50% more than the ones they're in. And these are
That is
jobs
a
that
large number. Yeah.
these are jobs that are in demand, and they're jobs that are in demand in the geographies where they live. We've adjusted for all of that. So fundamentally, when any industry that's saying, "Hey, we're not sure if we can get the talent, like we're doing an energy transition, but can we get the skills for that?" The answer is stars. The first order answer is stars. Skills, stars who have the skills, stars who are close to having the skills. And if you think about additional training or onboarding as a top up, wow, you've got a universe of talent that is available to you, both for existing jobs and for new and emerging jobs. And we really can rewire the labor market, and we really can tear the paper ceiling. That's the first step. It's like the first step is to make it possible by tearing the paper ceiling. Then the work begins. And I'm really happy that we have a coalition now of over 70 organizations, lots of great employers that are bringing not only their job demand, but also as companies, the capabilities they have, whether that's Indeed as the largest, job boards, like very active in tear the paper ceiling, whether that's Google, which is supporting with generative AI capability. And I mean, um, there's so many examples. And one thing I say often is that we cannot solve this problem in silos, and we won't solve it by accident, but we can solve it together and on purpose. And I just believe the Tear the Paper Ceiling coalition that we built and the campaign that is powering it is really such an example of how we're going to solve this challenge together and on purpose.
I love the ending on that too. But I am going to spoil it and ask you one more question.
Sure.
So throughout this entire, saga of being able to shine a light on stars, and I know you talk a little bit about your father. Do you want to give a little background about his inspiration to you?
Yeah, well, my dad in 1970 was working he was a shipping clerk in a factory in Detroit, and felt he wasn't really making, that much progress, and didn't see any kind of real career sort of upward opportunity there. And he saw an ad in a newspaper saying, learn COBOL and punch your own ticket, which you'll recognize as a COBOL joke.
Yes,
Like,
exactly.
what was COBOL? Like, what was COBOL? People might be asking themselves. Well, he asked himself too. He didn't know what COBOL
Those
was.
back when the punch cards, yeah.
He found out that it was like an IBM, like computer programming languages for mainframes, and there was huge demand. And by the way, it was new. They hadn't really been teaching it in colleges anyway. And so he quit his job and learned COBOL. And my mom actually talked to someone in the MIS department, the IT department of the company where she worked, to give my dad a job shadow, just to see what he can do. And he did that. Turned out he learned some COBOL. They had him, read some, had some write some, and they're like, okay, he knows a bit. And so they took him on as an entry level programmer. And that was really that was the start of our family's trajectory into the American middle class. And so the thing about my dad's story is, I knew we could do it because it had already done. We'd already undone it. So like
Right.
and a lot of things changed that didn't, and it's a new era. There's more technology and everything. And the first wave of technology was simplistic. So it was like keyword, searches and keyword filters. Well, like then it's not ridiculous to say, oh, college degree, that would be one of the more useful ones again. But that was like a minor convenience when you started having digital job search. But then it just like took off into this crazy monster of exclusion that really was
Right.
completely necessary. And now roll the tape forward, we've got big data, we've got predictive analytics, we've got all of these tools that make it, why the heck should we be
Large
sending
language models. Yeah.
so I'm saying like if you are still using 2002 keyword filters, like you're behind, like do your job, like get it. I mean, like really people should be embarrassed to be using like such like old school, simplistic, outdated methods as college degree screens. If you really can't figure out a better way to do it, like, I mean, really, let's get moving. So what I'm happy to say is that um, there are better ways to do it. There's multiple better ways to do it, and that you don't have to know when you start, oh, which is the exact way to do it. You can get started a bunch of different ways, and you can come to, to Opportunity Work or to tearthepaperceiling.org, or I mean, we have lots of tools, and again, these aren't just developed by Opportunity Work. These are developed by many of our partners. They are very, including like a lot of companies that the companies depend on for their business processes. They're buying into stars. They're creating stars friendly tools, and we're on our way to rewiring the labor market. We're on our way to really put performance over pedigree and to recognize and reward the talent that stars bring and the problem solving they do that we call work.
No, I love the fact that so many organizations, even those that you would think, traditionally would not be on board with something like this. Again, I mentioned ACT. I remember taking the ACT before, going to college. And it was, the only thing that I knew that was associated with college. And then for them to, have the workforce ready communities or work ready communities that they have really kind of opened my eyes of the way that they're kind of turning this page and starting to be a lot more broad in their perspective. I had a wonderful chance to meet the CEO. She definitely believes in the mission, knows stars herself, and it's just more of a now they see how much higher education can be a partner in this as opposed to an enemy in the stars movement. So I love that we're starting to embrace that. I love that people are now coming out as stars, even those that are sitting in the C-suite and executive positions that are identifying themselves as stars and then finding this embracing community that comes around them and says, hey, thank you for saying that. I am also a star, and what can we do to make this system a lot better for folks like us so that we can kind of all work together, both degreed and non-degreed individuals who are seeking the same path to success. So, with that said, thank you so much, Byron, for taking the time. I know you have a busy, busy schedule. One of the things I definitely wanted to do is capture some of these wonderful conversations that we've had, some things that you've said. I feel like, there's little spots here and there, but I'm glad we were able to capture them here today. So,
Well, I
with
appreciate you taking the time too, and I always enjoy our conversations.
absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for listening to The Paperless Pathways. You can listen to our podcast on Spotify, Apple, and on YouTube. Make sure you follow us and subscribe to the Paperless Pathways newsletter so that you can stay up to date with future episodes. Next month, we'll sit down with LaFon Davis to talk about what it's like to be a shining star. And I think it's a great episode, and you're not going to want to miss this one. If you want to support stars, we encourage you to join the movement and create a fairer workforce by visiting tearthepaperceiling.org. Pledge your commitment to break down barriers for stars today.